you've been one of the most high-profile conservative economists to call for a revenue-neutral carbon tax. I guess right off the top, why is that?
Well, because I really think it's tax rates that are the critical variable to the growth in the economy. And, as I did Jerry Brown's flat tax, for example, when he ran in 1992, which got rid of all federal taxes and had two flat rate taxes, one on business net sales and one on personal unadjusted gross income, both of them at a tax rate 13%. That's the only federal tax there would be. And, I like very efficient tax systems that do the least amount of damage to collect the requisite revenues. That's what I'm really into. And I'm working on that right now for anyone who will listen. And that's in the book, by the way, a lot of it in very great detail.
Well, that's the key, though, whether people will listen. And you're obviously a very respected economist, but taxes are ideologically taboo in the Republican Party right now. I mean, is there appetite to even have a conversation about taxes, especially a more complicated one that involves revenue-neutral carbon tax?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know whether it makes it through the Republican group or not right now, especially with what's been happening on the global warming research and what's going on in the deep offshore drilling. I don't know what type of thing can get focus. But the revenue-neutral carbon tax, is something that is there for the future. It's something that Al Gore has espoused as well. Bob Inglis, who is a Republican congressman from, I think, South Carolina, co-wrote the piece with me for the New York Times. So, it's not as though it has no chance. But today is probably not the day it's going to go through. But these things often take a long time to steep and to warm up and to get ready. And then, what you want to do is make sure the arsenal has good bullets in it as well as timing. Does that make sense to you?
It does. What I'd love to do is kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what it would involve. I mean, if the United States does adopt a carbon tax, how do we prevent made-in U.S. products from losing global competitiveness?
Well, you won't totally. I mean, obviously, if someone's going to make no carbon tax and someone's going to make a carbon tax, and people have a choice of where they bring their ship of oil, you're going to be at a competitive disadvantage for having that oil delivered here to be refined here if the carbon tax is administered here. But there are ways of doing it. You can do it where you have a border tax adjustment that will offset or at least for any products we consume that include carbon, if that's what you want to do. I did something sort of like that in Vietnam back in 1970, 71, where you tried to do incidence versus burden of taxes, and you're able to do a lot of things in your own country to affect the relative prices in other countries. And we can do that.
So by border tax adjustment, do you mean something like a rebate on the tax for exports and some sort of tariff on imports?
No, I didn't mean rebate on the exports. I didn't mean that. But what I did mean is a tax. If someone's going to produce in a place where there is no carbon tax, and then sell us products that include that carbon in some way, shape, or form back into the United States, and if we decide that it's that carbon that we really don't want to bring back in the shirts or the TV sets or whatever it may be, then you can always put specific tariffs to adjust for the carbon content.
Okay.
And thereby you'll affect the relative prices of those products here.
But now, only in the domestic market, right?
We don't have the right of taxing people in China. But we can affect Chinese relative prices by changing what they sell their goods for in the U.S. versus what we sell our goods for in the global community.
But what about U.S. products that are going to China? If they're not, if say we're trying to sell, a television in China, and there's a carbon tax here, but no carbon tax in China, wouldn't it make sense then to rebate the producer of that television on its way out?
Well, maybe, except let me ask you the question. I mean, let's say the carbon tax is because producing a television set here in the United States has a lot of pollutants in the air. I mean, we don't want that carbon here in our air, whether we're selling TVs to China or not.
Okay.
We don't.
Yes.
So therefore, we would be willing to give up that export market in order to have lower pollution in the United States, if that's the way you believe it. And therefore, we wouldn't want to rebate the carbon tax to the television exporter, because that would just encourage him to produce and use carbon in the U.S., which is what we're trying to avoid.
Okay.
Now, on the other hand, if carbon being used in China doesn't bother us, now, I don't know whether it does or it doesn't. Depends on how fast the air is moving, all that. But if it doesn't bother us, then there's no reason why we would want to offset their use of carbon over there. I mean, that's exactly what we want. I mean, so therefore we shouldn't tax them extra coming in. But if we do want to reduce carbon in China,
yes,
because it's a global warming thing and all that, then we would want to tax Chinese products that include carbon coming into the United States to offset for their carbon.
Moving on to...
You follow me?
Yeah, I do. And
it's rather detailed and rather complicated, but while it's complex, it's not conceptually difficult. It's very conceptually simple, and we have trade theory that allows us to do this very, very accurately and very well.
Moving on to another detail of the revenue neutral carbon tax, I'm wondering, how do you make it revenue neutral, and what the highest priority tax cut should be?
Well, what you want to do is you want to figure out what the what the revenue losses what the revenue gains would be from the carbon tax. Okay, which you can do. Here's the amount of carbon we're using. Here's what we're going to charge per ton of emissions into the air, or whatever that is. We get that revenue there. Then we sit back and go to, let's say, the personal income tax, which is my choice. And we lower rates by the percentage amount of that to total income taxes. So let's say this revenue that we're expecting from the carbon tax is 20% of total income tax collections. Then what we do is we reduce all income tax rates by 20% across the board.
Okay.
Bingo.
So it's income tax you want to see reduced?
Yes, I would much prefer the income tax, because all sources of income are taxed from the income tax.
Okay.
Now, Al Gore's proposal, which is also very good, by the way, just looks at payroll taxes. But it's not just payrolls that are impacted by carbon, although they are, but also income from the earnings of capital, income from rents on land, and all these others are also impacted by carbon. And so therefore I would make it a broad-based income tax percentage rate reduction. But now you're talking about, I hope, relatively small matters. But you want to make sure you offset the damage done to the economy from imposing a carbon tax by reducing taxes, marginal supply-side tax rates on output. That you got to do. Otherwise, you got me as an enemy of a carbon tax.
Okay.
You can't suffer this type of unemployment that these guys have brought on us.
Right.
Because it's immoral in the extreme what they have done to these people, these poor, the minorities, the disenfranchised. The last 3 or 4 years of Bush and this administration are outrageous in what they've perpetrated